We'll transition now into a discussion on investing in the new energy economy. This will be an armchair conversation basically for Dipender Saluja. He's with the Capricorn Investment Group, and Dipender, I think we're ready for you now.
Good morning. So, as Rod mentioned, we are going to have a short panel following this kickoff. I'm going to give a quick sort of 15-minute introduction to, from our perspective, this very exciting time and very exciting opportunity to invest in clean tech, renewables, this whole new energy economy. And then after that, there'll be 4 or 5 of us up here on stage discussing some aspects of it and how do we make sure that this space thrives and flourishes. Just by way of a quick introduction, our firm is Capricorn Investment Group. We're an investment firm based in Palo Alto in New York, and we were founded to demonstrate that it's possible to invest profitably while driving sustainable, positive change. We manage about $5 billion in a variety of asset classes around the world. Our approach is sort of long-term capital. It's permanent capital, evergreen, some people call it. And we're focusing on energy, technology, healthcare, transportation, agriculture. Basically, the idea here is to invest along themes that relate to big challenges and are also great opportunities. We were talking about that yesterday evening. We have 3 sister organizations. In fact, Capricorn itself is a pretty quiet organization. We don't talk a lot about ourselves, but our sister organizations are better known. We have 2 nonprofits. One is the Skoll Foundation, and their goal is to foster social entrepreneurship around the world, and they are about $1 billion foundation and growing, and have just had an amazing 12 years of creating this whole social entrepreneurship movement along with some of the other organizations around the world. Related to the Skoll Foundation is another group called the Skoll Global Threats Fund, and their focus is more to go after certain big, sort of hairy, audacious issues and go very deep on those issues programmatically. And the areas of focus there are climate change, water security, pandemics, nuclear proliferation, and the Middle East conflict. And then last but definitely not least is a movie studio that the group owns, and this is Participant Media. And they, over the last 8 or 9 years, have made about 70 movies, 5 of which are in the final stages now, so we'll have them this year. It's a combination of movies and documentaries, and the idea is the same. It's a for-profit movie studio, but with to create content with a social purpose in mind. And they definitely have won the hearts of Hollywood, and have been nominated for 37 Academy Awards and actually won 8 over the last few years. So we're very proud of that group down in Beverly Hills. Relevant to this conversation, many of you may remember An Inconvenient Truth. That was one of the first movies that came out of the studio. Following that, Food Inc. Followed, and then more recently Merchants of Doubt and a few others in the works. And I look forward to partnering with some of you here on new content. So moving back to this space and our focus. So as a group, Capricorn is a for-profit organization. As I mentioned, we have a combination of nonprofit and for-profits. And we're based in Silicon Valley. Many of us essentially grew up in Silicon Valley professionally. We all grew up in the technology space, in the computer, semiconductor space. And many of us, several years ago, about 8 or 10 years ago, saw everything that was going on that was very exciting on the electronics front, the software front, and thought about how do we bring that kind of energy, how do we bring that kind of focus, how do we bring that excitement into the world of energy, kind of try to get ourselves out of the stone age of energy, even though we're not running out of stones yet. So with that, our big focus is energy, and there we focus on everything from electrification of transportation to all things solar, to lighting, new materials, power electronics, water, etc., and we'll touch on some of those today. We also do healthcare and natural resources, and then some real assets. So the same theme, which is big challenges, big opportunities, and some of this stuff has not been very sexy with the venture capital community in California recently, but we think there's a lot to be done here. Just some portfolio companies. People always ask, what do you invest in? And I thought I'd flash a logo up of some of the companies, some of which you may have heard of, like Tesla and Sunpreme and SpaceX and QuantumScape. And if you're interested in any of these areas, please feel free to grab me, and I can tell you more about it. I can stand here all day and talk about these if we had the time. So I'd like to frame the opportunity really from a global perspective. I know most of us do most of our work in the US. A lot of our investment dollars are in the US. This is such a great place to invest, an easy place to invest. But from an energy perspective and from a climate change perspective, this is really a global challenge, a global opportunity, and something we have to think of globally. And here, I don't know if this has a, oops, sorry, I don't know if this has a pointer, but I'll avoid the pointer. Did I go back? Here, if you follow this curve, this essentially plots the Human Development Index with electricity use per capita. And if you look at all these countries, each one of those dots is a data point. As they've made this journey up the Human Development Index curve, they've done it with the aid of lots and lots of energy. This is pretty much a foregone conclusion that most human progress in the world requires energy, and most countries have done it with a lot of energy. The big ones that we tend to talk about a lot, and I know yesterday there was a lot of focus on China. The big ones, India, China, for example, if you notice, have a pretty long way to go still, both from that development index, their ambitions, and definitely from energy usage point of view. The hope is that they will not take that journey in the same way that most of us in the West did, and that we will be able to do it twice as better or maybe even more. But nonetheless, bottom line is that there's a couple of billion of people in the world with either no access or very intermittent access to energy. And that group of people has already started consuming more energy than the current developed world. Again, big challenge, but also big opportunity. To solve this challenge, this requires more than $1 trillion of investment, and a few $100 billion just to fill the gaps in the infrastructure that already exists. This is just filling the pipe, if you may, and there are not that many pipes. A lot of these regions of the world don't really have an infrastructure or grid to speak of. But just to fill that, we could spend a couple of $100 billion today and just get started. But going beyond that to get it to the 2 billion people, and making sure that we do it in a better way, do it in a more sustainable way, do it with renewables, is really the opportunity here. And putting that, breaking that down into two numbers, again, let me pick on my favorite two, which is India and China. If you look at energy usage per capita and passenger vehicles per capita, India barely makes even starts off on the left, and China is a bit further along. China's further along on the passenger vehicles per capita. India is just about the same. So same idea here, that as these populations achieve the goals that they have, as they achieve their aspirations and go through their development cycle, there's going to be this massive demand for energy that is going to continue, massive demand for all forms of global modern energy. And for those of us who are concerned about emissions, even while they are just starting relative to this curve. China is already the largest, and India is the fourth largest emitter of carbon. And so this journey cannot be repeated 20 more times in the same way that we've repeated it in the past. And I think that's, again, the challenge and the opportunity. This is obviously a massive burden. I'm sure that has been the theme for the last few days. Just lots of numbers out there, but the IMF estimates that the fossil fuel subsidies just alone cost us $5 trillion. So there's a lot of money here that is soft available to go address this. A lot of people often worry about where the money is going to come from. And the Wall Street Journal, which is not typically very fond of talking about renewables and clean tech, just last week had this interesting graphic with an article about the changing currents. And I think different people have different views of the numbers. I know we have a couple of people in the room that probably have better numbers, but the trend is good. It's that change over the last 10 years is looking very good. The biggest pieces that I'd focus on is over the last 10 years, wind having grown more than 1,000%, and solar having grown almost 5,000%, and obviously a lot more to happen there. But that genie is out of the bottle now, and as coal recedes pretty drastically. And talking about coal receding, many of you have probably seen the graphics like this. Coal is retiring at a record pace, not just in the US, but also globally. For every new coal power plant that's being built, 2 are being canceled. In some cases, like South Asia, that is almost 6 is to 1. And that proverbial coal power plant coming online every week in China has really slowed down, which is a great sign. But again, their appetite is huge. Like I said, there's a couple of hundred gigawatts that they need just to get their current pipes filled, so they're not going to stop until we have these alternatives that we're talking about, but the early signs are hopeful and good. Already talked about that it's not just about the US, the 2 big population giants are also showing that slowdown. So what are the solutions? Like I said, I could spend all day here, and we'll spend 45 minutes in the next panel talking about some of these, but there's lots of areas that I think offer great opportunities to go invest in. I'm only going to talk a little bit about the ones on the left because those are a little simpler and easier, and though there's excitement all across this page. I touched upon this. Solar, the story continues to be phenomenal. It is just a very, very exciting time in solar, even after that bloodbath that we had a few years ago. To me, the year 2008, 2009 in solar were kind of like the year 2000 in the internet economy, where there was a lot of blood on the streets, there were a lot of people in trouble, but if people had stopped investing in the internet in the year 2000, you can just imagine where the internet would have been today. So it feels like that year, and the best is here to come. Basically, there's been a 100x decrease in the cost of solar in the last 45 years, and just in the last 10 years, more than a 5x drop in that cost. And that's a wonderful gift to the world, and offers a big part of the solution. No surprise, it's driving geometric growth. Just in the last 2 years, we have doubled all solar installation around the world, and in the 2 years prior to that, we tripled all solar installation in the world. So this growth is really nonlinear and is resulting in some big numbers starting to show up all over the world. About 177 gigawatts till the end of 2014, which is a very healthy number. Roughly, let's say that's 1 nuclear power plant each. And then while Europe was the big story in the last decade, now you're starting to see, for example, in 2014, China, Japan, and the US really coming very, very strong and building up. And this is all happening, of course, because there are many unsubsidized markets at grid parity today. That is the most compelling reason why the world is adopting it. And while this whole sort of solar revolution started with Germany, a country that could really afford to take us there, there's a big, big opportunity and gap in the poorer parts of the world, as you can tell by this simple slide that shows you which parts of the world are lit and which ones aren't. Just repeating again, the couple of billion people without any electricity. And in that, I think one country that has never been talked about, I found that last year really had a turning point, is Bangladesh. One of the poorest countries in the world, many, many, many social problems. Out of all the opportunities, they found their solution in solar. And very quickly, there's 15 to 20 million people, more than 10% of the population, that already basically gets their energy from solar. And that growth just took off in the last 18 months, and it has become the fastest growing sector. And so this is just to say that, while Germany and the US and Japan and even China, obviously we all expect them to do it, even countries like Bangladesh. And this model is something that you're going to start seeing get repeated in South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and many other places that desperately need both sides of this equation. This solution is already cheaper than diesel, which is the fuel of choice in many, many places. I have a similar map for Asia, so very clear that that will proliferate. And I'm going to wrap up here very quickly. The opportunity is across the spectrum. You've heard of, I know there are many people, many of my colleagues here who are doing large solar project development in terms of solar farms. We've heard of many successful companies now doing solar lanterns, bringing light to people who don't have. Some 100 million systems just delivered very recently. And the whole space in between, which is productive power, replacement of diesel, replacement of kerosene, huge opportunity. You will see many, many companies that are worth billions of dollars get created in this space very soon. I think I'll hold the US opportunity for the panel and not go through that since we're short on time. And I'll just end with again, going back to a publication that's not typically very friendly to this concept, but just last week, I don't know how many of you saw this opinion piece by Fred Krupp from the EDF, where he summarized it really nice after the announcement that President Obama made, that this industry in the US is now larger than the domestic airline industry. And that just seems to have crept up on people. Nobody imagined that this would get there so quickly. And for many of us, it hasn't gotten there soon enough. But this is a real business. It's a very large business. And I think it's just the tip of the iceberg here. And people have complained about jobs. Very nice factoid I thought he had in the article, where he says, clean energy now delivers 3 times as many jobs per dollar invested as fossil fuel investments. So what's not to like? Thank you.